Good afternoon, everyone. So it's Emily from A&D. Can I confirm that everyone has signed into the webinar system, but also onto the teleconference unit?
Yep. Hi, this is Helen from the ACTU.
Okay. So we do have a few more people who are due to join us, but I'm also conscious that all of those on the line have turned up on time. So we're going to kick off, and then I'm sure people will come and go throughout the session. Yes, Miranda, I've just seen your question. You beat me to it. The webinar will be recorded and available on the members section of the A&D website within the next week or so. We just have to, after the session, our providers just need to do some behind-the-scenes work on that, but it will be available with the slide deck shortly thereafter. So for future reference and hearing my dulcet tones for all of time. So welcome to the webinar. Your presenters here today in Sydney. Oh, my picture's missing. Oh, there it is. So my name is Emily Sparling. I'm a Relationship Manager and Trainer at the Australian Network on Disability, and I also have the lovely Stephanie Littlewood, who is going to be our chat host today. Hi everyone. So I'm going to present the slides, and Steph will be responding to any queries that we get through the chat function. So to start off, I thought it's really important to talk through how you can chat to us through the session, and also how you can ask any questions that you may have as we move through the slides, because we do look forward to hearing from you and getting your feedback, but also if you have any questions, you're very welcome to ask. So first, to go through the chat function, you'll see at the bottom of your screen that there is a chat function bar. It should be on the bottom left-hand side of the screen, and this is how you can communicate with us via chat. So just like Helen and Miranda have done, you can type in a message, and Steph will come back to you with a response. If it's a question that will impact the wider audience, I will also be addressing that verbally as well. So please do remember to chat to us, because we do like to hear from everyone online. Of course, if you prefer to use the phone to chat to us, that is absolutely fine as well. So either way works for us. So just some general housekeeping before we kick off, and some rules for the session today. Our webinar will run for approximately 40 minutes. And we've allocated plenty of time throughout the session for questions and answers as well. So very much we're here to provide you with the content, but we've also given plenty of time for you to be able to have discussions and ask what questions you have. It is a short session, so we won't be stopping for a break, so I hope everyone's got a cup of tea or coffee and maybe a sandwich to keep you going. And to confirm, we will be recording the webinar today, so it is available for you to download and for other colleagues to be able to access after today's session, so people may not have been able to attend, and we do encourage you to forward them the details following today's session so that they can catch up on the webinar if you like. So one thing to note though, I guess it's a rule if you like, is because we are all dialed in via the teleconference for audio today, because that's a more accessible way of communicating, it's important, if you wouldn't mind, just to mute your phone, just so that we can limit any of those background noises that might be happening. And it is also, if you could limit distractions, so email and things like that, because we would love you to have your full attention as we go through, and we will sort of be moving through the session quite quickly. And of course, we will bring up our handle for Twitter, so if you would like to tweet about what a fantastic session you're in, please feel free to do so. All right, so there's our handle there, at A&D Disability. So this is why we're here today. So on the screen you can see the cover page of our beautiful new Manager's Guide for creating a diverse, disability inclusive workplace. So we're here today to learn more about this fabulous guide, and also how it can support you to be a confident manager of people with disability. With around 1 in 5 Australians experiencing disability, building an inclusive and diverse workforce benefits everyone. And as a manager, you all play a vital role in creating and also sustaining a positive workplace where everyone can thrive. So this guide will support you as managers to be able to effectively recruit, support, retain and develop employees with disability in your workforce. It is available to purchase in both hard copy and HTML, so however you prefer to view view materials, and it can be uploaded onto your intranet as well if you do purchase the HTML version. But we'll talk a little bit more about how you can access the guide later. So before we run through some of the details of the guide, I thought it would be a good chance to run through a very quick overview of who AND is, because I'm conscious that we do have managers on the line who may not have had direct conversations with AND. So for those of you who know AND really well, I apologise, but hopefully this is just a nice refresher. So please bear with me. So who is AND? We're a member-based organisation, we're not-for-profit, and we are driven by our belief that people with disability are skilled and capable social and economic contributors entitled to equitable opportunities in society. So we work together with your business as a member to help you increase your disability confidence, engagement and action. We work with over 200 members. We announced our 200th member only last week, and from both the private and the public sectors. Our vision is to create a disability confident Australia, and we do so working with you to increase your disability knowledge, working on inclusion plans, training and consultancy, as well as programs which many of you will have participated in, including PACE mentoring and the Stepping Into internships. We believe fundamentally that it's about changing the behaviours and attitudes of employers and providing structure and framework for effective systems and knowledge to help members to become more disability confident and to facilitate the inclusion of people with disabilities. So the next slides I'm going to run through are a disability confidence refresher, again because I'm conscious that there might be people on the line today who haven't experienced A&D training today. And I will run through this refresher before I get into a little bit more information on the guide. So what is disability confidence? Disability confidence means that you are anticipating that some employees of yours, whether they're current or future, will have disability, and it's about you as a manager feeling confident in your ability to respond fairly and equitably to accommodate their requirements for a workplace adjustment. So why is being inclusive of people with disability relevant to you as a manager and also to your organisation? There are real and measurable benefits for organisations around being inclusive of people with disability. The first point I'll talk to you today is the talent pool. Being accessible and inclusive as a manager ensures that you're hiring the right people for the right role and that your organisation is going to be recruiting from the entire talent pool. The next point is retention. So inclusion ensures that you're able to actually retain skilled and talented and valuable staff who may have or who may acquire disability. And we'll talk more to retention when we speak through some of the specific aspects of the guide today. The next point is reputation. So welcoming people with disability helps to promote the reputation of your business as being inclusive and ensures a positive employee experience. People with disability and their friends and family will actively seek out organisations that demonstrate inclusive behaviours. The next point is rights. So the rights of people with disability and their right to equitable access is just the same as everyone else's. So legislation such as the Disability Discrimination Act protects these rights. The next point is risk. So it is a huge organisational risk if we're not aware of people's rights and we're not creating an inclusive environment within our workplaces. And we certainly want to be a proactive organisation and avoiding any potential complaints through the Human Rights Commission. Now on to some statistics. So almost 1 in 5 Australians identify as having disability. That's 18.5% of our population, or approximately 4.3 million Australians. Over 2 million people with disability are of working age. Yet only 52% of this group are actively employed, which means only half of this group are actively engaged in employment. So we've got close to 1.1 million Australians in our society who could positively contribute to our workforces, but they're not yet currently engaged with an organisation. So the way you can help, organisations can help to ensure participation through positive action towards access and inclusion, and also welcoming, as a manager, welcoming and valuing diversity in your workforce. And this is why, really, it's important to be an inclusive manager so that we can recruit from the entire talent pool and bring that diversity into our workplace. The majority of Australians are not born with disability. They acquire disability as they age. This might happen at work, through physical or mental health conditions, or it may happen at other times during our life. Thinking about the Australian workforce though, the average age, let's say, for the government sector is 45 years, meaning the probability of individuals in this workforce acquiring disability is 1 in 6. So 1 in 6 people by the time they're 45 will have acquired disability and may require us to provide a workplace adjustment. Disability is one diversity group that we may all be part of, and A&D believes that for this reason we should think of ourselves as people who have disability and people who don't yet have disability. So what is disability? It's time to define disability. So the definition as stated in the Disability Discrimination Act says disability is any impairment, abnormality or loss of function of any part of the mind or body, and includes all of these areas, so physical, intellectual, mental illness, sensory, neurological, learning disability, physical disfigurement and immunological. So the definition is very broad to ensure that the rights of all people are protected. Disability can impact the way a person moves, understands or communicates, and you will notice that a large majority of the disability types are actually non-visible. So we don't necessarily know in our workplace who we're engaging with, whether they have disability or not, meaning inclusion is important to make sure everyone feels welcomed. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities looks at disability from a different perspective. So the definition focuses on the societal barriers, for example, barriers that might be present in our workforce that would prevent an individual with disability from equitably participating. So let's explore this a little bit further because I know that there's a lot of words on the screen. So disability is the impact of the impairment. It is not the impairment itself. So disability can be exacerbated by an environment that creates barriers. The old way of thinking about disability relates to the person and their impairment, and this new contemporary way of thinking about disability focuses on the interaction of a person's impairment and their environment, and whether that environment increases a person's ability to participate or decreases that person's ability to participate through a barrier. As managers, you are all responsible for creating an inclusive environment and identifying any potential barriers that may prevent people with disability in your team or in your future team from participating. And a little bit of a plug here, the Manager's Guide is an excellent tool to assist you to recognise and remove some of these unintended barriers. Okay. Before, we're almost done with the disability essentials, but I also wanted to share a couple of key concepts with you before we move into the guide. So one key concept that is important to be aware of is sharing of disability information. So a person may choose to share information relating to disability at any time during the employment relationship. They do not necessarily have to share through the interview process or perhaps through the onboarding process. And it's important to note and be aware that there is actually no legal obligation for a person to share information relating to disability. Rather, as managers, we want to focus on workplace adjustments and identifying what these are so that people can be their best selves and achieve the essential or the inherent requirements of their role. So the more inclusive we are as managers, the more employees and colleagues will feel comfortable sharing information. Does anyone have any questions so far? Please feel free to ask them either via the phone or via the chat function, and we will pause at regular intervals to answer those.
Yes, it's Anne-Marie here.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, it's Anne-Marie calling from Adelaide.
Hi, Anne-Marie.
Hi. I just wanted to, when you said that before about there's no obligation for an employee to share this information, but you're there to provide a supportive environment so that they can feel that they can share that.
Yeah.
Then how does one as an employer, as a supervisor, create adaptations or whatever it is that's required for that employee without knowing sufficient information?
Sure. So what we want to look at when we're managing staff is looking at the impact of disability in the workplace, and the way we would do that is through asking about and seeking information about what types of workplace or reasonable adjustments an individual might need to be able to complete the essential requirements of their job. So to create a truly inclusive environment where people do feel comfortable and safe to share their disability information if they would like to, the focus really should be on adjustments and how you can assist that individual through the adjustment process rather than placing too much emphasis, if you like, on the disability itself. The reason we do that is because, one, there is no legal obligation for an individual to share specific information relating to their disability, but also when we do learn about someone's disability, it can sometimes mean that we might make assumptions, if you like, in terms of what is going to be the best adjustment for that person, rather than our advice or suggestion would be to actually speak with individuals and ask them what they think the most appropriate adjustment will be, as they are the experts in their disability, and they will be able to provide you with the most appropriate workplace adjustment recommendations. Does that make sense?
It does to an extent. I'm thinking more in terms of, I could understand that in respect of, say, a physical disability, that, but I'm thinking in more of for mental health conditions, then how does one, if someone is saying I'm fine and that they're able to, and saying, no, I have these reasonable adjustments and I've identified that this is all I need as a reasonable adjustment, then how do you then assess that that's actually working and that you are providing the most supportive environment to enable them to work effectively?
Okay. What we're actually going to, as we go through some of the more specific information to the manager's guide, I will be addressing reviewing adjustments and how to ensure that they are being implemented effectively. So if I don't answer your question at the end of that, I'm very happy to readdress. Is that okay? Just because we will be talking through that as we go through the session. But thank you very much for participating and asking the question, and I'm sure it actually is one that a lot of people on the line are actually thinking about, because you're right, we can implement an adjustment, but we want to make sure that it's actually being effective and is the most beneficial thing for that employee. Now on the screen now, we have brought up a screenshot, if you like, of the cover of a guide that we have, which is titled Sharing and Monitoring Disability Information in Your Workforce. Now this is a guide that we created last year, and it looks at reasons around inclusion in the workforce and reasons why employees are comfortable sharing information relating to their disability. So that's where they're working in a very inclusive environment. And it also addressed reasons why people chose not to share their disability information. So perhaps people might have not been asked, or they might have had a negative experience in the past that may be impacting on their decision to share or not to share in their current workforce. It also gives you a guide to what you can ask and what you can ask to be inclusive, and also areas or information on what not to ask. So it's a really valuable guide, and you'll be very happy to hear that it's available on the resources section of the ANZ website for free. So please feel free to download that guide and distribute it amongst your workforce, because it really does help to provide a little bit of structure and information around the values and the benefits of inclusion, but also it gives people the do's and the don'ts in terms of how we communicate as well. So another important concept I wanted to address today is workplace adjustments. Now these are also still under the Act called reasonable adjustments, but for ensuring inclusion, A&D calls them workplace adjustments. And as a manager, you're likely to already be managing staff with disability, so it is really important to be aware of workplace adjustments and also being aware of your workplace's policies and procedures in regards to implementing and reviewing workplace adjustments. Now the image on the screen is possibly one of my favourite, and it's a great way of illustrating the impact of workplace adjustments. So many people think that it's important to treat people equally. However, equal treatment may not result in achieving equity. And equity is really where we do things differently by acknowledging and accommodating difference and making adjustments to assist each individual to be on a level playing field. So this illustration demonstrates this concept perfectly. When you give everyone a box, so this is the first picture, when you give everyone a box to stand on, the shorter person still isn't able to equitably participate in watching the ball game. But when you give people adjustments, or in this case boxes, based on their individual requirements and needs, then everyone is able to see the game and to participate. The last illustration on the right demonstrates what you might call a perfect world. So this is where there are no barriers. In this case, the barrier was the fence. And therefore, because there are no barriers, there are no requirements for adjustments. Wouldn't that be nice? So to define workplace adjustment, a workplace adjustment is a change to a work process, a practice, a procedure, or even an environment that allows a candidate or employee with disability to perform the essential requirements of the job. Adjustments will be unique to everyone. However, some common ones are flexibility. So this could mean working from home, altered start and finish times, a condensed working week, additional breaks throughout the day, working remotely, and many more. Changes to communication style, remembering that everyone has a preferred communication style and we may need to adjust our style at times. And supervision and or a buddy. So providing someone to talk to and providing that little bit of extra support can assist employees with disability. Other adjustments include workstation adjustments, so ergonomic equipment, job design, Auslan interpretation, and maybe even screen reading software for computers. Now we've run through some background on the disability essentials and we've looked at some key concepts. It's now time to explore the guide a little bit further. So the Manager's Guide to Creating a Disability Inclusive Workplace was developed with our members as a useful guide to assist managers and supervisors to effectively support employees with disability throughout the entire employment life cycle and also to create an inclusive and welcoming environment for all. So on the screen now you'll see the chapters that are included in the guide. So we have Disability Essentials, Creating an Inclusive Workplace, Establishing Fair Recruitment and Onboarding Procedures, Providing Career Development Opportunities and Supporting Success, Retaining Employees who acquire disability. Now as we've covered Disability Essentials prior to now, I'm going to focus on 2 through to 5 and provide a little bit more information on what those sections of the guide cover so that you know what benefit you'll be receiving through the guide. So, creating inclusion. One of the key focus areas of the guide is around providing structure and support so that you as a manager can create inclusion within your workforce but also within your team. So we create inclusion through our language, our behaviour and also our actions. So we are all unique and inclusion means that everyone can bring their whole self to work and feel free from discrimination. So it's really around being ourselves in the workplace and not feeling that we have to leave a part of what makes us unique at the door when we come into work every day. As a manager, you play a vital role in creating and sustaining a positive workplace where everyone, so each of your team members, can thrive. Some of the benefits of inclusion include increased employee engagement, so people feel a greater sense, they feel more part of the team because they're able to do all of the essential requirements of their job, but also we're creating inclusion around all aspects of the job, so looking at it with team activities, team meetings, we're allowing people to participate. We're creating a safe work environment as well, that's really important. Reduced absenteeism because people feel they are an active contributor to the workforce and want to contribute. And improved productivity, so everyone feels that they're part of a successful team and contributing to that. So how do we build an enabling environment? How do we create inclusion for all of our employees? An enabling environment is one where your employees can bring their whole self to work, which we've talked to. It helps individuals perform at their best and feel included. And an encouraging and enabling environment is one where everyone knows it is okay to ask for adjustments if they require one. So our role as managers is to communicate that it's okay to ask for adjustments, but by communicating that and through our behaviours and our actions, it will provide a message to individuals at any time it is okay to ask for a workplace adjustment if they require one. So the manager's guide will actually take you through how to create an inclusive workplace through these next steps. So around recruitment, so how to create inclusion through recruitment, how to create inclusion through development of staff as well, and also how to retain valuable staff and employees with disability. Now we're going to now run through some communication hints and tips which will also support inclusion, and these are outlined in the guide for future reference. But as we've talked to how our words and our language can make a huge impact towards inclusion in the workplace. So A&D, to start, A&D has 3 guiding principles that will support open and inclusive communication. So please remember these. The first is never make any assumptions. So when you're having a conversation with an employee and they do share information either about their adjustment requirements or perhaps they're comfortable sharing information about their disability, it's not making assumptions based on that information. It's actually always asking the person. So exploring what that person needs in order to fully participate in the workforce. So being comfortable to ask that person. And finally, the last guiding principle is that a person's disability and their experience of disability and in fact the impact of their disability will be unique to everyone, which is why at A&D we focus on the adjustments and providing that to each individual rather than talking too much to disability because everyone's experience will be different. In Australia, we use person first language. So this is also communication, which means person first means putting the person or the individual first and not putting the focus on their disability. It's about respecting individuals because people with disability are just people. Many people with disability have had the experience of feeling excluded in the workplace and as a result of this may be sensitive to behaviours that they don't perceive as inclusive. So behaviours and communication they don't perceive as inclusive. So to give you an example, not greeting a person with disability but greeting other colleagues in the workplace could be perceived by that individual as non-inclusive behaviour. So why we want to talk about communication today is to ensure that our language is empowering and not labelling, but also to have the confidence to have conversations even when we may not be sure of exactly what to say. So an example of person first language you could use is person with disability or person living with disability. You could also choose to say someone is a wheelchair user or a person using a wheelchair. So as you can see, person first is putting the emphasis on the individual rather than disability. Language can have a strong impact and using empowering language will ensure our communication is inclusive and welcoming. The last points we'll make on communication are, remember to focus on the individual and what their requirements are. Always ask people before giving assistance, so allowing them to share before providing assistance. As managers, the next 2 points are really around creating that inclusion through your language in the workforce. So listening without judgment. If people choose to share their disability information with you, thanking them for sharing and listening without judgment. But also facilitating open discussion. That's really around talking to your staff about workplace adjustments and making sure that you're communicating regularly around you want to provide adjustments if they require them, so that they know that should they require one, they can come to you at any time. Being flexible and someone who is approachable and responsive also helps to develop that inclusion through our language and our behaviour. And finally, don't worry about using common expressions because we use them in our everyday life and people with disability won't take offence if we use those common expressions. Okay, the next area of the guide we're going to explore today is establishing and ensuring our recruitment and onboarding processes are fair and equitable. So creating a positive enabling environment begins before your employees are even hired, so before they have even applied for a role. The recruitment process sets the stage when it comes to establishing a workplace where everyone can thrive. Today we're going to touch on the interview and onboarding as part of this section of the guide, but there is a lot more information in the guide for future reference. So the interview. A barrier-free recruitment process means that candidates with disability have a fair opportunity to demonstrate that they are the best person for that job. What to ask during the interview. So the questions you can lawfully ask, and these are provided in the guide, include whether any adjustments are required to ensure a fair and equitable process, so asking people about adjustments, how the person will perform the essential requirements of the job. So that is fair to ask. How will you achieve the outcomes that are required for this role? And if any adjustments may be required to complete the essential requirements of the job, so following the interview. Onboarding. Hopefully by the time you're onboarding your new employees, you have asked at regular stages through the recruitment process about adjustments. So to ensure everyone is being included in the onboarding process, it's a good idea to assess and reflect on what your onboarding procedures look like. How are new employees welcomed into your team? Is there a face-to-face training that someone may be required to complete the onboarding process? Is this face-to-face training, do we ask whether people require adjustments in order to be able to participate? Additionally, do you ask new team members to complete an online module? So a lot of us have to complete online modules as part of our onboarding. Do you know as a manager, when you're asking staff to complete this module, whether it's accessible and whether it may be accessible for someone in your team who may, for instance, be using screen reading software? That might be something that you can explore following today's session. And the final thing I'll talk to with onboarding is facilitating positive conversations. So it's important to consider how you, as a manager, will facilitate conversations with colleagues. So this is colleagues of your staff member with disabilities. Will your new employees or co-workers be required to do anything differently? Is there an adjustment that they may be required to assist with? If so, it is important to discuss with the new employee how they would like to inform their colleagues of any specific requirements or information. So it's important to get that employee's buy-in into that conversation. It's also important as a manager to pay attention to interactions among your new employees and existing team members. If people lack confidence, sometimes they may be uncertain about what to say and do. And avoidance is also a form of exclusion, and we want to avoid that. So if you do notice anything happening, find out what your team member needs to be able to feel that they can include that new team member into activities. Now the next area from the guide I'd like to focus on is career development and supporting success for people with disabilities. So it's really important as managers to be able to provide those equitable opportunities for development. By providing challenging career development opportunities, you'll not only bolster your team's skills and experience, but you're also more likely to retain valuable employees, both those with and without disability, because you're creating an inclusive environment for all. So there are many aspects to career development, and these include goal setting, team building, networking, mentoring, providing leadership opportunities and identifying if there are any skills gaps that you might be able to provide additional training for, and then providing that skills training. These areas are explored in more detail in the guide, and provide you an idea of how to go about implementing successful career development opportunities. Like any other employees, team members with disability have the right to participate in learning opportunities and to explore different career development options as well. As with all aspects of building inclusive workplaces, it starts with a conversation. It's important to discuss goals and identify future career paths with all of your employees. Remember, don't make assumptions about what someone may or may not wish to do. Points to remember when reviewing opportunities with your employees. Ensure opportunities during professional development training and team events are accessible. That's really important. That provides everyone with an opportunity to be able to participate. It includes things such as physical accessibility, so the venue and what activities you're going to be doing is an important consideration, but also if you're doing training online, to review and consider the accessibility of that training. Activities should be inclusive so that everyone can participate, and the guide will support you to ensure that you're creating equitable performance opportunities and goals for people with disabilities. So how to create equitable employment performance goals. So employees with disability have the same performance targets as people who don't have disability. So we hire people to achieve outcomes related to their role. And assessing performance is a vital part of creating an inclusive workplace. People like to know how they're tracking and how they're progressing. With that in mind, here are some steps to help you create equitable performance goals. Identify what the expected outcomes and results for the job are. So they're the essential requirements of the role. As a manager, you should know what you're asking your employees to achieve by way of outcomes. Ask about adjustments. So when an employee starts in your team, it's appropriate to ask about adjustments, but also at regular intervals through the employment life cycle, asking if an adjustment is required, because this may change over time. Implementing adjustments, that's the next important step. So making sure that we're implementing adjustments in a timely manner, as this will allow people to be able to get on with the job at hand, so to speak. So implementing adjustments is important. Match expectations of performance against the required outcomes or essential requirements of the role, rather than the standard process. So what we mean by this is identifying what the outcomes of the role are, and then an adjustment might mean that someone still produces that outcome, they may just produce it differently. So for example, someone who is expected to produce a weekly report, someone may type that report using a keyboard and a mouse, and other people may use speech-to-text software as an example, but they are still producing that report. So it's focusing very much on the outcomes. And it's important to evaluate the employee on job outcomes and agreed goals. So it is important to provide that support and evaluation. So how do you assess performance during a probationary period? So the probationary period is an important period in which a new employee's performance is assessed to determine whether it meets the standard to move forward to continued employment. So for employees with disability who need workplace adjustments, it's fair to assess performance after these adjustments have been implemented. So that's really important to ensure that if someone does have disability and they require an adjustment, that we're implementing the adjustment before we're assessing someone's performance, whether it's through a probationary period or a performance review. So that's an important point to know. If in doubt as to whether you as a manager have enough information on which to make that assessment, it's recommended that you extend the probationary period so that you've got more time to make that decision based on merit. The final area of the guide we're going to explore today is retaining employees who may acquire disability. So as we've talked to, many people in Australia acquire disability as they age. So employees that are working with you currently may also acquire disability. As a manager, you're likely to face a situation where an employee's health situation changes. So knowing what can say can make all the difference. So if someone does share information with you, it's important to thank them for raising the issue and acknowledging as well their honesty and courage, because it is not always an easy thing to do in a workplace. Ask that person if there's anything they would like you to do or not to do as well. So asking what they would like from you as a manager. Find out if they need any adjustments and what would make it easier for them to continue to do their role. Provide that person information on resources that are available, such as your workplace adjustment policy and procedure or your employee assistance program. So providing people with information so that they can explore what is available. Be open. Don't worry about saying the wrong thing, because we're all human and sometimes we say the wrong thing. Remember, it's important to address the situation even if you don't feel confident and you might forget your words. And remember, the guide and also the sharing information and monitoring guide will provide you with examples of the right questions to ask. So they are both a very valuable resource in terms of giving you that structure around what questions are going to be the most inclusive questions to ask. So that concludes what we're going to review today in terms of content on the Manager's Guide, but also I wanted to provide you with some information on how you can access the Manager's Guide. So if you're interested to learn more or to order a copy of the Manager's Guide, so it is available in both hard copy, but we have also produced an HTML format which essentially means you're able to purchase that link, and that link can then be uploaded onto your intranet or your learning management system, and allowing all of the managers within your organisation to access the guide. And a final note for managers is that very soon we'll be releasing, I guess is the right word, our Disability Confident Managers eLearn program. So this is an opportunity for managers to dial in and be taken through disability confidence, but also some more steps on how you can be an inclusive manager in your workplace. So that is coming shortly, so keep your eyes peeled. Question time. So does anyone have any questions? And certainly happy to readdress the question from before if you'd like some more information, but either through the chat function or on the phone. Are there any questions from the group?
Hi, this is Helen. I've got a question.
Hi, Helen.
Hi. I've had some of my colleagues have asked if there is guidance around, particularly on performance management, where they are aware that a staff member has a mental health issue, and partly trying to separate out perhaps sporadic mental health issues from performance issues, but also not adding to the stress of the situation.
So what can I confirm is what is?
Are there any guides around that
right.
will assist with performance management for people who perhaps have mental health issues?
So our guide covers reviewing an employee's performance. It's not a detailed guide in terms of performance management. So when you do commence that performance management process, the guide will provide you with the steps that you need to take before you review an employee's performance. And essentially those steps are having a conversation and making sure that employee knows that workplace adjustments are available and that you're very happy to work with them to implement what's going to be effective. Reviewing that workplace adjustment, so once it is implemented, making sure that you've allowed adequate time for the adjustment to be effective and for that employee to be able to demonstrate their capabilities in terms of that role. So performance management is something that you can proceed with if outcomes are not being achieved, but you do need to ensure that you've asked about adjustments, implemented adjustments, and reviewed the effectiveness of the adjustments before you commence that process. So it's one of those things, I think anything performance management can be, no one likes to do performance management. I'm from an HR background and it's not fun, but it is something that as long as you've provided the employee with an opportunity, they understand that an adjustment is fine and that you are very happy to work with them to implement that, and then you review that adjustment, you can then explore whether those outcomes of the role are being achieved or not.
Yep.
But it's very important to have that conversation about adjustments, and it provides that equitable inclusion for that employee to have that conversation around adjustments and to implement, if necessary, prior to starting any performance management.
Would you ever recommend including some sort of advocate or other party to assist?
I suppose in a general performance management conversation, an employee is able to bring a support person if they would like. And certainly, some individuals may like that, others don't. So it's really up to each individual whether they would like that. But the best thing you can do is follow your process after you have actually explored those workplace adjustments. But yeah, if someone wants to bring a support person, I think that's a perfectly okay thing for them to do.
Thanks.
No worries. Any other questions?
Hi, this is Tanya from the Reserve Bank.
Hi.
Hi. I just have a question in regards to asking about workplace adjustments. Is it best practice basically to make it a standard approach for anybody that you recruit, or as a standard approach for existing employees in each performance review cycle to ask them what adjustments they need, regardless of whether you know or not?
Yep. We at A&D we say best practice is to start asking the question about adjustments before someone has even applied for a role. So by that I mean on your website, on any job advertisements and any job descriptions that you post to draw people from the talent pool. But you're right, we should be asking people at every step of that recruitment process, but then into the employment life cycle. So I would, you want to ask regularly enough so people understand that they can request an adjustment. And so if you have performance reviews once a year, it might be something that your managers choose to sort of, every quarter, just as part of a regular catch-up, just making sure that employees are reminded that they can ask for adjustments if they require them. But we would say best practice is asking regularly and also promoting through other aspects. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a one-on-one conversation. It might be in team meetings, but it might also be through activities such as celebrations for International Day of People with Disability, Mental Health Month, and it could just be things that are regularly conversational pieces that are uploaded to your intranet as well. But we would recommend asking regularly and at every stage of the recruitment and employment life cycle.
Thank you.
That's okay. And I'll say the one benefit of doing that is that even if someone doesn't require an adjustment, it's actually communicating to that person as well how inclusive your organisation is and how much you do actually value money, because value diversity, I should say. Don't know where that came from. But how much you actually are essentially ensuring that you're recruiting the right person for the job and that you are putting your money where your mouth is what I meant to say in terms of your diversity within your organisation. Any other questions? We're quiet on the chat function today. All right, if there are no other questions, and please, if you do have a question, if something comes to you after today's session, please don't hesitate to contact us, whether it's your relationship manager or phoning through, and we're very happy to answer questions after today's session. One final point is that we do like to be liked, so please, if you would like to get in touch, please feel welcome, but also if you haven't already liked us on Twitter and Facebook and following us on LinkedIn, we'd love more followers. It makes us feel very popular. So please feel free to do that after the session. We do regularly post articles and information and hints and tips on all of those platforms as well. So it's a great way as a manager of staying in touch with the updates in terms of diversity and disability information. And finally, I would like to thank you for participating in today's session. It's always great when people feel that they can ask questions and have a bit of a chat, because it means that we're hitting the mark, if you like, I think, in terms of some of the content that we're providing. But I'm going to, when we end this webinar, we'll send you through to a link on Survey Gizmo, and we would really value your feedback. So it's feedback on today's session, but also a chance for you to provide any comments or suggestions for future webinars. So our webinar series will kick off again in 2018, and we're always very keen to ensure that our content is addressing the requirements of our members. So please don't hesitate to give us some hints and tips there. We're very happy to help to receive those. But I'll wrap up now, and thank you all again for participating, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and week, and it's not too soon before we all break for a bit of a break at the end of the year. So thank you for participating, and I wish you a very happy and safe festive season and a wonderful start to 2018. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.